Let's get some more details now on the TikTok, its final attempt to avoid being sold or being banned here in the United States. The U.S. Supreme Court hearing arguments on a law that sets a deadline of what is now fewer than 10 days for the Chinese social media app. The case is pitting national security concerns against free speech. And the Chinese embassy here in Washington issued a statement on Friday criticizing the U.S. government for using, quote, state power and of using national security reasons in an effort to suppress TikTok. And it also called for the United States to respect market economy principles and fair competition. Following this case closely has been Saurabh Gupta, Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist at the Institute for China-American Studies. Saurabh, always good to see you, my friend. Thank you for chatting with us.
Good to see you, Sean.
So, it's always dangerous for people to try to read between the lines as the U.S. Supreme Court hears arguments and answers those arguments from the attorney involved. But people on TikTok are doing just that in this case, because it is a very important case, pitting First Amendment against national security. I want to get your thoughts on where we are right now.
You just made a very, very good point as to trying to parse out exactly what the Supreme Court justices are thinking, and it's not a very wise thing to do, because if one listens to the questions and the discussion that went on today, the First Amendment issue, which is the one which really backs TikTok up, is not one that was really interrogated in great depth. The issues which were interrogated in greater depth were the national security questions. And the question at the end is the trade-off between First Amendment and national security. So if one just goes by the line of questioning today, you would think that the government's case government is in a stronger position. But who knows where this actually comes down to, because the justices would not have taken this case up because they thought that the appeals court predominantly looked at the national security issue and did not give enough attention to the First Amendment free speech issue. So again, early to come to a conclusion on this.
Yeah, and also the clock is ticking, and the justices don't have to make a decision anytime soon. They could do it as late as June. So what are the primary constitutional challenges that you believe TikTok is raising right now?
The primary constitutional challenge that TikTok is raising and has raised for a period of time is the free speech issue. And that free speech issue fundamentally boils down to that it is being uniquely targeted on this issue by essentially that the national security issue has overridden the issue of free speech, and that is fundamentally the underlying issue which needs to be interrogated. One has to understand, some of the landmark rulings in the area of First Amendment say that, parties can even request and acquire and communist propaganda, and that's perfectly fine. That's their right. That's part of their First Amendment right. And here the government is making the case that even subliminal appeals, which might be potentially manipulated by an adversary, by, say, a communist adversary, now entail a national security challenge that is so dramatic that the site needs to be shut down, and the 170 million users need to essentially be disabled. And so that is the point that TikTok is fundamentally getting at, but we'll have to balance national security with free speech issues.
Yeah, and Saurabh, as you mentioned, 170 million people in the United States using this app. A lot of people are making a lot of money on it as well. So you have to think that international entities interested in opening up an application here in the United States are going to be watching this case very closely.
Yes, they are watching this case very closely, but they might also gauge that this is something particular and unique, and it is essentially directed at an app which has some element of control by a foreign adversary, and the U.S. tends to keep that definition of adversary fairly narrow. It's not a broad-based designation, and therefore I don't know how applicable it is in terms of outsiders viewing this as, oh my God, even we might be targeted at some point of time. But I think this does raise issues of fundamental fair play, fair competition, and justice.
Yeah.
And I think those are the areas which countries and other and businesses will be looking at in the course of this case.
With that in mind, we know that India and Iran have already banned TikTok. So how is this impacting the United States?
I don't think that has real material implications or influence. You know, when Donald Trump actually tried to ban it right in, I think it was October or November 2000, he had actually brought up the Indians having already banned it. But let's be clear, I mean, the Indians banned it with absolutely no due process. It's like, goodbye tomorrow, TikTok, you're done. No due process whatsoever. And in Iran, I'm assuming that process was just as shambolic. And so I don't know of how much that constitutes a precedent for what happens out here. And we must understand that, I mean, the First Amendment is unique even in terms of free speech issues within Western democracies. The US stands in a very different place because of the First Amendment from even, say, a France or a Germany, let alone a India or an Iran. So I don't know how much that is really applicable in this case.
Fair enough. Sir, real quickly, because we don't have a lot of time, and it's a somewhat complex question, but could this lead to reciprocal bans against U.S. companies abroad, firstly? And secondly, oddly, Donald Trump could be the white knight at the end of the day, coming in here and having the clout to stop this ban.
Yes, first of all, on Donald Trump, you know, the court, I doubt is going to rule before that. Frankly, I think the court might just rule a stay at this point of time and try to expedite its ruling, but by which time Donald Trump will already be president, unless the court overwhelmingly feels very quickly this is purely a national security issue, which I kind of doubt it. As to how it is going to be seen abroad and whether it's going to entail reciprocal countermeasures, my feeling is that the Chinese, and they're watching it closely, and they are dead certain that they are not going to, that the algorithm, the recommendation algorithm, which is export control, will remain that way, and that this is a process which needs to be negotiated with the next administration. And we'll see how that goes, because Mr. Trump himself has talked in terms of finding a solution, negotiated solutions down the line in the course of his administration on this.
Okay, Saurabh Gupta, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.